At 7, my dad had a farming accident, and it was at that age, I didn't know I was going to go into health tech, but I got a sense of the problems in the health system.
Hayley Saddington's entrepreneurial spirit was driven from a very young age.
And I was out in the paddock with my dad. His arm got caught in this big piece of machinery, and I was the only child out there that day, the person helping the paddock.
Living rurally meant Hayley and her dad were a long way from the nearest hospital. So they put in a call to the Royal Flying Doctor Service, who would meet the pair on the other side of the paddock. But with no way of getting there, 7-year-old Hayley jumped into the driver's seat and drove her dad over to meet them. That accident demonstrated to Hayley the difficulty people have accessing medical care. It ignited a passion in her that would see her going from physio student to successful medtech entrepreneur. A journey that would land her on Shark Tank and see her pitching a product to the NBA. A founder's story can be a powerful thing. It's what drives you to succeed. And on your toughest days, it's what drives you to keep going. And it's not just a tool for motivation. Leaning into a personal connection with your product or service can be what gets you over the line with customers and also investors. This is The Business Of, a podcast from the University of New South Wales Business School. I'm Dr Juliet Bourke, a Professor of Practice in the School of Management and Governance. So Hayley, tell me about your dad's rehab process, because it sort of became the catalyst for your career.
We started to have to go to a lot of medical appointments and the follow-up and, post-amputee. It was at that point I was like, okay, it's so disruptive. We were 500 kilometres from the nearest, hospital that could help. So really sort of looking at what we could do to people, our loved ones, to get them the care at ease was in ground very early.
Fast forward to university, you're studying physiotherapy and you have an idea for a product. Where did the idea come from?
Study really never came naturally or easy for me. I was very much, the kind of creative, the business sort of person, which I didn't really know at the stage when I started uni. But I guess it was at the point where I saw this problem. I saw this tool that we were using and having the background of experiencing a loved one who needed these kind of physiotherapy tools. It was the only tool we would use to get range of motion on a body. And it was protractor-like, very archaic, often up to 30 degrees out. And this is what we use as a gold standard on our loved ones. So my brain has always been wired to sort of laterally think how can we do it better? So started the idea.
I saw that Shark Tank episode that you were on, and we have to talk about Shark Tank, but it's literally like a ruler along one part of your body and a ruler on another part, and then there's a central pivot point.
It's so simple. Exactly right. The one you've just described is the tool we used to use. And now the Halo, which I came up with, I guess the problem solving was how do we make it more accurate? How do we bring it into the digital age? How can we get tools to physios, that were up with the age and really accurate?
How did you land on that? Why that tool? I'm assuming there are other tools which are equally archaic, or maybe that's the only one.
No, there's so many. Just something inside me was like, I'm going to go on this. And I'm very much that person on, if I see the problem, I'm going to finish it. The way I did that, I talked to heads of departments of physios. I talked to other physios. I talked to other physio students. And they all thought the problem was also a problem. And so it allowed me to cascade into that.
So how do you get from that idea, and you said we then, what's the we? How do you do research and development around it? How do you get a team together?
Our pathway with that first company was really around, let's raise some awareness. Let's go out and apply for every opportunity possible. And I remember writing the Shark Tank application, thinking I would never get in. We did that with WA Innovator of the Year award, and that just sort of allowed us to be seen at a very, it didn't cost anything other than time. And that attracted mentors. It attracted some startup capital to get going.
But even on the Shark Tank show, you had this little device that was now using sort of laser to measure the angles in someone's limbs. How did you develop that device?
When we won an award in Western Australia, I had a person in the room come up. He ended up being our first investor. He said, I know how to do this. I know how to make this idea into mass production. I've got a manufacturer I'll introduce you to. And so that was the approach. We went down, sort of looked at, do we need regulatory? And that was just using the advisory services. We had some in-kind support. So we lent on those supports to learn, as well as this incredible advisor who really stepped us through those first parts.
So you had this random investor who turned up at a presentation you were giving. How else did you get your investment to do what you needed to do?
So at the time, before I started Halo and Halo Medical Devices, my partner at the time had passed away. So a really pivotal point to go, well, what do I do here? I had a very small and painful inheritance from it. I could have done something sensible with it, which has never been my pathway. It was only going to be taken in one direction. So I used that small amount to start Halo, and I matched that with a grant that I applied for, which doubled it. And I was really careful on where every dollar went because it was money from the heart.
Did you have to do your own research and development, or did someone come along and do that for you as well?
No, we did it all. We did it all. So I think the first process was, we went to Bunnings and I brought some parts for this very manual, analog-looking device, which, evolved into this beautiful-looking white halo with lasers. But that was the first process. And then, there's all the other elements of the business. How do you name it? What product do you go with? What company name? How do you place this through the regulatory submission? How do you write a grant? And I Googled a lot of that.
So were you working at the same time? Was this sort of a side hustle that you had going, or was this, you had enough investment to just completely focus?
No. We made a few units. So we did a small little production run, which were just samples. And at 6 a.m, I would take them around to physiotherapists who would open early, literally in a big IKEA bag. And I would say, would you like to try this for the day? And we slowly built up customers, testimonials. So we started very, very slowly, and then realising that is not the business model of growth. We then moved to distributors to get it out to physiotherapists.
These 5 new sharks will put their own money on the line.
$500,000.
I'll give you $1 million.
What?
I will give you
And
the
I'm
full
sure
amount you
being
want.
on a big show like Shark Tank, which you mentioned before, would have earned you some credibility when you're approaching distributors. What was that experience like?
Do you know what? It was so fun. It was one of those moments, we weren't prepared in terms of, we didn't spend hours rehearsing. I sort of rocked up to the studios and I knew my product so intimately. It was one of those experiences where it didn't matter what questions came up. And, Steve Baxter fired these incredible technical questions. And I'd been sitting with our engineers for 2 years talking about accelerometers and goniometers prior. So it was like anything that came up, we could just answer authentically. And the experience was great, a great advert. And we gained our first distributor by being seen on it. So it has a great reach. We did a deal online and then that didn't go through.
So let me just pause there. So in the studio, there was going to be some investment, I think, from 2 of the judges. And you're saying that didn't actually come to fruition.
It didn't come to fruition. And it was an interesting point of view. I feel it was probably for telly, really sort of making sure that we did a deal, we got a deal, and offline, even before we entered the due diligence process, we were told by one of those sharks that they need to be seen to invest in female leaders. And this would probably be the end of it because that had been visualised on TV. So that was what had happened.
Good for people to know, right? That is the behind the scenes.
Absolutely. So great for people to know to be prepared and not, hang everything on that Shark Tank experience. Like it is what it is. It's a great advert, incredible experience, great for you to be very quick and know your business and be really confident in it.
And it was your product is very visual. You can see this old protractor-like thing, and then you can see your own halo with the laser lights. It's much better to see that than describe it in some ways. I'm sure people are Googling right now, halo.
Halo goniometer. And I think it came across just like that on the show as well. We had the manual protractor and, the sharks were like, wow, I can't believe everyone is using that and not this. So it was a easy show.
How long did it take you to develop the digital goniometer?
I had the idea for about 2 years. I think that's a really important note to make. We have these ideas, and it's the same as my current company. It took 3 years to come to fruition. You talk about it, you start to get people on board, you start to raise capital, bring some awareness and validate it. It takes time.
So with that goniometer, you're building it, you're getting validation, and then what happens?
It was around, how do we get this out to more people? And how do we build a trusted brand? Who do we align with? And I think in that first company, I really took risks. And one of those risks was going over to a physiotherapy roadshow in San Diego, hiring the cheapest booth at the very back. But there was 10,000 physiotherapy students coming through, and I knew that. So we made a great video, had these incredible bright turquoise shirts, and we spoke about it and we showed them and got it in people's hands. And that led to a trial with the Mayo Clinic. Like, there was just these cascading moments by putting ourselves out there on a shoestring as well, on a budget.
The Mayo Clinic, that's a major brand to suddenly be in your orbit. How did that happen?
One of the students at that particular conference said, look, I've got to get my professor. So he happened to be a professor who was also at the Mayo Clinic. And I asked him about validation, and he's like, well, we'd like to take it through a validation. And so we ended up doing a paper with them. So it was just through conversation, right timing, and I think putting ourselves out there.
A couple of times now, I'm almost expecting you to use the word luck, because you talked about there was an investor who just happened to hear your presentation, and then you're at a trade conference and there just happens to be a student who's, got a professor at the Mayo Clinic. But you're putting yourself in the way of luck. Is that how you think about it?
I think so. I hesitate to use luck because I strongly believe that it's around timing and being prepared and flexible in that moment. And it's understanding what you need to move forward and having the ability to have a conversation with that right person who can perhaps grant that. Or obviously not everything comes to fruition, and we're just talking about the lucky moments. But yeah, I think, timing's everything.
That is a good point. We do talk about the peak positive moments. We don't talk about the other side. And so are there other side moments that you've learnt from that you would want to share with other people?
It's often the moments where I have prepared the most or gone in with the direction I want to come out with in business the most that fail. The thing that's worked continuously from now is going in and really being flexible in the conversations, doing as much research as we can on a partner, for example, or a potential partner. It's doing as much and looking at how you can really understand their pain points or really understand what they want to do. Do they want to grow? Do they want to sell more implants? How do I align with that? And I come in with solutions to do that for them. That's something that's worked really well.
Why do we only talk about the good times? Sure, it's more pleasant to celebrate success, but what do we really learn from that? Like all successful entrepreneurs, resilience has been Hayley's secret weapon. Hard times and tough breaks are inevitable, so being prepared and adaptable is crucial. But how do you actually develop resilience? Barney Tan is the head of the School of Information Systems and Technology Management at UNSW. He's been looking at some research out of the business school that will help you and your organisation weather the storms ahead.
So resilience is vital for entrepreneurs and startups due to the challenges that they face, such as fluctuating markets, uncertainty, financial constraints, and unexpected setbacks. The financial constraints is a especially big one because, with startups, they're always looking for resources. They need resources. And as a startup, they're actually the most vulnerable to setbacks. Any setback could potentially be fatal for startups. I think Hayley's journey especially demonstrates the importance of resilience. So, for example, after her deal with Shark Tank fell through, she didn't let it derail her plans. Right? Instead, she used the exposure from the show to gain her first distributor to show how basically resilience can turn disappointment into opportunity. The key to nurturing resilience is, first, you have to develop a growth mindset. Entrepreneurs with a growth mindset view challenges and failures as opportunities to learn and grow. But it's not just a mindset, it's not just a mentality. A growth mindset is actually backed by the ability to acquire resources, financial support, and to manage these resources and financial support effectively. So it's a bit like this. If you're an entrepreneur and if you are not great at acquiring funding from investors, what you end up with is a situation where you're using your own money. And when you're using your own money in an entrepreneurial venture, what tends to happen is that you would tend to pinch pennies. You will look for ways to save because every cent you spend is going to hurt. And that's why a lot of successful startups, having acquired the funds from external investors, they tend to invest into the best R&D. They tend to invest in optimizing their processes, optimizing the distribution channels. They do not mind spending, right, to achieve these strategic benefits for their organizations. It's a growth mindset, but that is backed by the ability to acquire funding and resources and the ability to manage funding and resources. And not only that, of course, with funding and resources, there's a need to build a support network, right? So resilience is nurtured by surrounding yourself with supportive mentors, advisors, and peers. A lot of startup founders will be very much part of incubator setups. Now, these networks will provide guidance, feedback, and even emotional support during difficult times, helping entrepreneurs stay grounded. Joining startup communities and accelerators would be very beneficial to gaining access to a reliable support network. People who have experienced the same things as you have, people who have walked the walk that is able to show you the way. Another critical aspect of nurturing resilience is really not just focus on the immediate business viability of the business. The most powerful startups, those that have the ability to rally investors and other resource owners to the cause, are those whose mission are aligned with a higher purpose. When people believe in your cause, they're more likely to invest in you, right? If you're just a business looking to make money, then it becomes a very transactional relationship with your investors where their investment decision is solely motivated by your revenue or income generation capabilities. But by aligning your startup's mission with a higher purpose, this also actually helps entrepreneurs stay motivated as well. A clear sense of purpose will serve as, basically a guiding post to provide focus and direction even when the journey becomes difficult. Research conducted by my colleagues at UNSW Business School have shown that purpose-driven entrepreneurship is critical. And entrepreneurs like Hayley, who are motivated by a strong mission, tend to be more resilient to external challenges, including market downturns and competition. This mindset and this alignment with a higher purpose is important because these entrepreneurs would be able to draw on their sense of purpose to navigate difficult decisions and remain committed to their long-term vision.
So to start a business, you need a great idea and you need investment. What else do you need?
Mentors, advisors, people you can trust, people you can bring into the fold who can either streamline you to the next stage. And that may be they introduce you to a manufacturer. They may be someone who opens a door at a health fund, really being careful on who they are. Or it may just be someone who you trust and you can almost, as a sole founder, in my current situation, someone I could trust and almost treat like a co-founder and just bounce ideas off. The way I work is, as I'm speaking, I'm making decisions. And that mentor for me is someone who can sort of anchor things down or allow me to consider things I hadn't considered. So someone who's trusted, or I feel a deep trust with, someone who I can say anything to, and is just available.
And so now you're on the other side, right? I think you're a mentor as part of the UNSW Founders Program.
Yes, I have been with the inaugural Health 10X team. Originally, I was the entrepreneur in residence for 3 years, and then now I'm doing that program ourselves.
So, what's the advice that you give as a mentor to your mentees around blending this story of purpose as well as finance?
I give the advice of you must have that story and that problem and that patient or who's solving this for at heart, and really visualize so you can connect to it every day, because going on a health tech journey is incredibly hard, incredibly long. It's a marathon, so we need to be able to connect to that. But we also need that ability to talk about numbers and consider other possibilities of getting to market.
Your journey is full of unconventional ways of putting your product out there and getting to market. How did Halo end up being used in America's National Basketball Association?
We went over and I spent a week in New York and I got as many appointments as I can. One of the NBA teams was one of them. And I talked to the athletic trainers who get what we were doing really, really quickly. And I left a unit with them. And since then, the NBA ordered Halo. So it was sort of understanding where their problem was, making sure I could get that meeting while I was over there. I think we spent our last dollar to get on that plane and make that trip happen. But I packed it full of incredible opportunities, really using my network. So meeting with the physiotherapist at the Boston Ballet, and then hence we sold to the Boston Ballet.
But how did you know the physiotherapist at the Boston? Like this sort of luck theme, but you make your luck.
You do. I think you have to be creative. We have to be authentic and creative. And the process is, okay, who is the physiotherapist at the Boston Ballet? You're only ever 2 or 3 points of separation from them. And I think if you are authentic in your approach and you clearly establish why you're going to help them, people are pretty open in connecting you. And it was just one meeting and I understood the issues they were going through, and that's it.
And Boston Ballet leads to NBA, leads to?
Well, we then were in the major baseball league as well. The Codes over here as well, the AFL and the Roosters. So it just, I think, kind of cascaded because it's a small world, the elite sports, and they all like accuracy and ease, and it was a nice fit.
So as you've scaled your business, I think you got some advice when you were overseas about changing your narrative from that very personal story about your father to where you are now.
Yeah, there was a pivotal moment. We were doing an accelerator in the US, and it was the first time I'd been challenged to move away from my story. And I'm a believer in it's, your story leads you to here, and it, allows you to grow or go through certain experiences and achieve certain things. It shapes who you are. But they said, let's disconnect from it. And so for the first time, I was like, what is the company without that? Who am I without that? And so it was really challenging to go, okay, this is what we are. It was almost like removing the depth and all those years of connection. But I think the biggest thing, if I look at my sort of history, there were Dad's accident and other things that have happened in life were drivers. Every morning I'd get up and I would make sure that dollar was working really, really hard in the business because I had those drivers on why I was there and what I was doing. So to separate from that was extremely challenging, and I don't think it's right. I think the story is what makes you unique. It still drives you. So I think staying to that is should be encouraged, not discouraged.
So tell me about success. How do you measure success?
My first company, Halo, I defined success around financial metrics. How many units we could sell, what multiple of revenue could we get, and how much we would exit for. So all around finance. The second company, PeakMedical, was almost a flip of that. So success is more about, as a CEO, am I there with my 4-year-old each night? How am I balancing that out? Yes, we have financial metrics. Yes, we have, how many customers we want to meet, how many people we can help. But there's a more holistic approach in the second company. I guess that comes from maybe because it's my second company. Maybe it's because I've changed as a person and very much grown. I don't know, but it's more rounded success metric.
So what does PeakMedical do?
PeakMedical is an AI rehabilitation platform for care for anyone who needs it, anywhere, anytime. It's clinical advice using artificial intelligence in the home. So this, we wrap around lots of segments, but we're starting with total knee replacement patients. So if you're a rural patient or someone who's busy in the city, we're going to give you all the care points you need to get stronger, adjust your fear, post-operatively understand your pain, and make sure we're giving you that care pathway from physical and mental.
So why did you decide to shift from Halo to PeakMedical?
Peak was something unique in the sense that it was a clear medical software. Halo was a medical hardware. I decided to move away from the medical hardware element because the logistics and the world shut down a little bit over COVID, and it was hard to get parts. It was hard to get shipments delivered. So I thought, how can we reliably get patients care at home? And software's the answer. It just has no barriers. We can get it anywhere, anytime. We can run updates. It's highly scalable.
But the origin story for you was about your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And the origin story for PeakMedical was about...
Ooh, I love the origin of Peak because it is so dear to my heart. So I sat with hundreds of patients who have been sitting on a wait list to get a new knee for years. Well, at least 12 months. And it's heartbreaking. They wait for a year, they have a list of questions, and they go in to see the surgeon and the care team. They get around 10 minutes in a group setting. This is a public hospital. People travel hours to get there and they don't really know what to expect. And they're rushed in, rushed out. No fault of the care team. They've got other patients on the table waiting they've got to get back to. But they walk out often with higher anxiety, high fear, and often more questions. So we wanted to change that. Healthcare equality is the heart of Peak, and those patients are who I connect with every day.
So what are the learnings, or what's a top learning that you would take from Halo into PeakMedical?
Think big, think bigger, and that can only be encompassed or, enabled if you personally as a person can think bigger. And so I'd say the advice is to make sure you're working with a mentor or someone who has gone bigger before you to sort of allow your thoughts to expand there. Otherwise, you can design something that's quite niche, which is okay in some circumstances. But I think thinking bigger and putting yourself in that position would be my advice to myself back then.
And is there one thing that you now know that you wish you'd known at the beginning of your career?
Just to listen to my own intuition. At the beginning of my career, I hadn't done anything before in the health tech space before I started my first medical device company. And so I really had to, as you do, listen to people who have done it or advice givers to sort of take you in a certain direction. I think if I had anchored to my intuition a little bit more, it perhaps would have streamlined. So it's really important to be clear on that and centre there.
Was there a moment that you realised that you should have listened to yourself?
Yeah, so does that come from age or experience? Maybe a bit of both. I think it's just a point in my life where I became just confident in my intuition because when I did listen to it, things worked out. I don't know if that's after motherhood. I don't know if that's after the second company or just age, but probably around 38, it kicked in.
That's very precise. Around 38.
Around 38. Just before my first child probably, so that makes sense.
The Business Of is brought to you by the University of New South Wales Business School, produced with Deadset Studios. If you enjoyed this conversation with Hayley Saddington, we have another female founder story you might like to listen to next. It's our episode with Alexandra Smart, the co-founder of fashion brand Ginger & Smart.
Large organisations now not only require but desire leaders who can think creatively, think quickly, think in a dynamic way with an element of risk to get things done.
You can find that episode linked in our show notes.